then, because we can just, yeah, rather than keep other people waiting. Okay, so let's do it then. I'll stand up so you can see me. So thank you so much for coming, everybody. Welcome to the final in this series of hustings debates from putneydebates.uk. The aim of these is to engage people as much as possible in the process so that you can ask questions. There are no questions that are sent in advance. The first person to put their hand up gets to ask the question. The format of this debate is each of the candidates, or representative of the candidates, will get about 3 minutes. We have a timer here. Should tell you when 1 minute has elapsed, 2 minutes, and then you'll get a 30-second warning. Then after they've had their 3 minutes each, then we'll take questions from the audience. And they'll get around 1.5 minutes to respond to your questions. If one billed as a topic-specific one, because it's the last one, we're going to make it a general hustings, if that's okay. But of course, you can ask any question you like. So just to introduce who is here. To our far left, I just coincidental where people have sat, but hey, we've got Heiko Koo from the Workers' Party of the UK. Next to him we have Bill Colgrave, who is representing Rejoin EU, because Felix, the candidate, couldn't make it. He's actually standing in a different constituency. Then we have Fergal McEntee, who is representing, you are the candidate for the Green Party. Walking in the door, we have Kieran McCarthy, who is from the Liberal Democrats. You can sit over there, there's a space for you. He's far left. And to my right, we have Peter Hunter from Reform UK. Again, it's still really far. And I'm in the middle somewhere, because I am the independent moderator. I can, hand on heart, say that I have probably voted for most parties over the years. I'm a local constituent, and I work in this area, and I'm a homeowner in this area as well. And I just feel passionate about free speech, about getting people involved and engaged. So just to let you know that Lee David Roberts couldn't make it tonight. He was very apologetic. He's from the Conservative Party. He has come to quite a few of these debates, and he is a very staunch supporter of the debates, but he just couldn't make it. And we have not had representation from the Labour Party. They have been invited, and it has not happened in the series that I have organised. Okay, so toilets are over there. And I hope you enjoy the debate. With no further ado, we'll start. Why don't we start? Well, no, I'll let you have a break for a second, Kieran. You just arrived. You can a bit. Why don't we start over here with Peter?
Excuse me.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Who are you?
Oh, sorry. Thank you. I've introduced myself so often I got bored with it. My name is Eilish Jordan.
Okay, and you are?
I am a local constituent. I'm a teacher, I'm a homeowner, and I'm passionate about free speech and politics and getting people engaged in the world around them.
Okay,
that's who I am. And I'm going to do my best to be as fair a moderator as I can. I'm quite anal about it.
Can I ask a question? Can we ask questions after each speaker, or do all the speakers speak?
So all the speakers speak first. Yeah, we give them a chance to say their bit. Then you ask your questions. Now the way I've been doing it is you ask your question, they get 1.5 minutes to respond, and then I go back to you. Do you feel that your question has been answered adequately? Okay, so there is a right, and there's a right of reply here as well if people really want to come back and say something else. It's supposed to be a debate. We don't want to spend too long on one question, but we will allow a back and forth. Yep. All right. So, Peter, are you ready to start?
Great, thank you
3
very
minutes.
much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Time is running, so I'll give a very quick summary. So I'm Peter Hunter, I'm the candidate for Reform. You'll remember the strapline Peter for Putney. You'll have seen it on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Panorama, and everywhere else. But the serious point, which I've been making all the time, supported by some of the others, is that you have a real choice here in Putney this time, because even Nigel Farage is saying that Labour are going to have a thumping majority. And if that is the case, you have the choice here as to who you want to have as your next MP. You don't need to have a Labour MP here who is doing her first time from 29 onwards in order to get Mr. Starmer, Sir Keir Starmer into position. So you have a real choice. And what I would say is, please don't waste your vote. I mean, obviously vote for Peter, for Putney, but also don't not vote, because that would be a mistake, and afterwards you can't complain. And I'm here because I believe really in the importance of all the issues that you stand for, and we've heard a variety of them over the last couple of weeks, starting with things like Wandsworth Bridge and wanting to get that sorted out. A lot of the first hustings were unhappy with the plans to redo the Wimbledon tennis courts, take away or redevelop the golf course, and have 3 years of trucks coming along. A lot of you are worried about crime, and these are all issues that we in Reform are keen to concentrate on. We're worried about low levels of crime, shoplifting, burglary. Some of you are worried about low traffic networks and the way that it's clogging up the traffic. That's good for pedestrian, children and bicyclists, not so good for anybody else who's trying to get around by car. And also it's bad for air pollution because those slow revving engines are there for longer and nobody can get anywhere, and it's more inefficiency. In some basic details, we have said that we, if we have sufficient MPs, will prevail on whoever is the government, we're not saying that we will be this time, to raise the tax threshold. It's very important to everybody in this room, from £1,250 to £20,000. What that means is that everybody of us on the low earning thing will get an extra £1,340 back in their pocket straight away annually, because you'll be paying less tax. And now we're not going to raise less than the taxes for everyone at the top thing, so that's where we've got to. I've got 30 seconds left, so I'm going to look at my cheat sheet and see if there's anything else that I would particularly like to mention. And we also got some theories about housing, and make sure that you get the priority for the housing in your own borough. And that is, and I'm happy to take questions later, so I would say thank you again for coming tonight. And that's my 3 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Afternoon, everybody. My name is Fergal McEntee. I'm the Green Party parliamentary candidate for Putney. And just like the gentleman was saying here, you actually do have a choice in this election. So pretty much Labour's going to have a landslide. So why I'm standing, I'm a renewable engineer. I crunch numbers, build solar farms, and I've been studying climate. Sorry guys, can you do that? Studying climate for the last 20 years, working in renewables the last 15 years. I crunch numbers. And the problem that we've got an ecological climate emergency, pollution emergency, and collectively where we're going as a human species is not in a very good place. And it's quite evident right now, sea levels are rising, temperatures are increasing, our ice caps are melting, it's all measurable. We've got top scientists in the world been screaming for years, warning about the effects, and now you turn on your TV, if you actually Google it today, you'll see flooding going across Switzerland, wildfires in South America, all these places. Point is, what we need to do is we need to put in long-term strategies in place to actually deal with this. And in order to do it, what we need to do is we need to redefine how we actually live as a society. We've got a society that's based on GDP growth, which is a continuous growth on a finite planet, which does not fit in well with physics, because we can't continue growing our economies. What we need to do is we have a circular economy. In order to do that, we need to sort out housing, we need to sort out health. One of the things about climate change, it is one of the biggest benefits we'll have is going to be job creation, sorting out our rivers, our seas, cleaning them up. At the same time, we're going to be cleaning up our air, we're going to have healthier air. We're going to be healthier because we have to change our diets, we're going to cycle more. So what we have to do is to tackle the ecological climate emergency, we actually have to tackle how we live. And in order to do that, we need to redo politics. So the Green Party, I'm very proud to be standing with them. Excellent set of policies, going into in-depth areas, into all the different things that we need to do in society to improve it. Cost of living is not a crisis. What it is, it's a problem with the capitalist system that we've got in this country. We've got super rich, we're the 6th largest economy in the world, and we've privatised our rail. We can't get on the rail. We've privatised our waters. And what we need to do is we need to renationalise lots of our industries. And on top of that, we need to then start taxing polluters and make our society fairer, greener, and better for everybody. So 4th of July, if you vote Green, you're going to send a very strong message to the incoming governments that you want strong green policies. So there's no such thing as a wasted vote. And especially in this election, we know Labour's going to win. So if you want to do something for your children, your grandchildren, vote green. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am Bill Colgrove. I'm going to stand up because I'm a small fella and otherwise I can't be seen. I am standing for the vote rejoin EU. So we're a single issue party. I'm actually the candidate just across the river, but this one can't come. I hope, like, I've got to assume I'm speaking to some extent to the converted, because I'm not going to convert people in favour of the EU in 3 minutes. But the latest reports we had from The Economist showed that 70% of Britain were regretting Brexit for their own reasons, for their own financial reasons, and they're now working out why people are regretting rather than if they're regretting. Now, most candidates for this constituency really agree with us, but they're frightened of saying so. Congratulations to the Liberal Democrats and the Green and SNP in Scotland are in favour, although rather reluctantly in some cases. The Labour Party, I mean, the candidate here has in effect told me that she is. The candidate across the river privately says to me all the time, Bill, I agree with every word you say, but their own party leaders are not supporting them. Now, we're not here to try and lay blame for the Brexit vote. You know, we all take collective responsibility for that. But we can now say, wait a moment, we know it isn't working. 8 years later, it isn't working. Why has Labour produced a 36-page manifesto without mentioning it? Much the same with the Conservatives. Liberal Democrats moving slowly towards it. In the case of the Brexit Party, they're here, they can actually answer the question. Their own manifesto starts with, we have a lifetime, a great lifetime, an opportunity of a lifetime. Maybe after 7 of these debates, one Brexit candidate is going to come up and tell me what those opportunities are, because they have not done so far. Now, all I want to do, all the Rejoin EU party wants to do, is to persuade the two main parties, give them the courage to go out and say, yes, we can reconsider it. We know the Europeans want us back. We know it's going to save us a lot of money. Estimate £100 billion a year we're losing by not being in the EU. We've got to persuade them to start thinking again. A big vote for us might go a little way towards it.
Thank you.
It was a book in my house when I was a child. It was a blue book. I was a little kid. I didn't really read that much as a kid, but I did open it lots of times. And it was by a guy called George Satayana, a philosopher. And he said, "He who does not learn from history is doomed to repeat it." I have not heard during the course of the debates on television any discussion of any depth about the crises that have affected mankind during the last 5 years. Humanity has been dragged through the most tyrannical types of monstrosity in the whole of my life, and I'm 60 years of age. The world was turned upside down. We have discussed things at various meetings here about bridges, about shops, and all these things are relevant. But during the course of the last 5 years, all of our lives were turned upside down by global issues, beginning with the pandemic. First, I believe there was a genuine pandemic. I issued a video very early on, in early March, arguing that there was a need for a shutdown. I didn't actually argue lockdown. I argued for a 3-week shutdown because the incubation period was supposed to be 3 weeks. Then, as the summer drew in, I began to draw conclusions by analysing what was being discussed amongst well-respected scientists in Germany, that we were being led up the garden path into a fraudulent, dictatorial seizure of power by big pharma and big tech interests in the same way, and I didn't even know this, I was so ignorant, I didn't even know that the whole thing had had a dry run in 2010, which had been exposed, which was called swine flu pandemic. And the European Union accepted it was a fraud. They passed a resolution at the European Council, 58-2 in 2010, moved by a Labour MEP called Paul Flynn, and backed by another MEP, the Social Democratic MP from Germany, Wolfgang Bodak. And I discussed with Wolfgang Bodak about what was happening, and I became convinced that he was 100% right. This was another fraud being carried out by Big Pharma in order to promote dictatorial power over the people through utilising the pharmaceutical industry to try to control the population and sell goods to the population. By the way, these goods now have been proven. It's not my assertions. John Campbell, who I'm sure all of you have seen at some stage or other on YouTube, the most prolific person on the whole pandemic period, he says that the vaccines that were used were never safe and efficacious. They should never have been authorised, and they caused enormous harm. My mother, who's 89, she says amongst her friends, they keep quiet, but they say to each other, they're suffering from long Pfizer. That's what my mother's generation say to each other in secret. They don't even dare tell their children that they feel they were led up the garden path. So I'm after exposing what happened in the last 5 years, not only in relation to the pharma fraud, but also in relation to the wars. But we'll come back to that a little bit later on.
Thank you very much.
Hi, how are you? So my name is Kieran. I'm from the Liberal Democrats, and I'm here to try and persuade you to vote for me to be your next MP. One of the main reasons I decided to get into this peculiar political game was I was in America when Donald Trump was elected, and I lived through the Trump years. And today, the Supreme Court, literally about an hour ago, announced that the president has immunity for official acts, meaning that he won't be prosecuted for basically trying to storm Congress because he lost the election. Now, what's that got to do with us? It's worrying. There is a worrying rise of power, not just here. Anything that happens in America eventually makes its way here. And I think what we're going to find in this election is that the Labour Party are going to end up with a very worrying amount of power. And while Keir Starmer is no Trump, I don't think he's quite on Trump's level of awfulness. He will, however, have an enormous amount of power, and he will use it. He's already used it to basically boot out the previous leader of the party, which I find is extraordinary, but that's what's happened. And if you want to know about the arrogance of power, look, where is the Labour candidate? Where is your previous MP? She's not been to any of these, and I'll tell you why. Because she doesn't want to answer questions about why the high street is such a state. 2018, 3 closed shops, now there's 22. She doesn't want to answer why it's taken 5 years to open that bridge, and according to her, it's fine. She's working really hard. Well, she's not working really hard, and I can give you the stats if you want to hear them. And she's arguing, oh, it's going to be fine. It's not going to be fine. It's going to be another 5 years. We need an actual plan. She's not here because she does want to take questions, as happened in the first hustings in Roehampton, about the terrible housing plans that people are up in arms about in Roehampton and the Ashburton estate and in Toland Square. She doesn't want to answer this, and she doesn't have to because she thinks she's already won. So she just doesn't turn up. The Conservative guy did come the first week, hasn't been at the last 3. Why? Because this Labour candidate isn't here. This is what happens with the arrogance of power. What I'm saying to you is the Lib Dems are already in power in Richmond and Twickenham and Kingston and very soon in Wimbledon on Thursday. You should vote for the Lib Dems here as well because we believe in sharing power, and I guarantee you that next time around I won't be walking away from these hustings. I'll be here and I'll take all of your questions. Thank you.
I'm going to take questions now. Try to keep them short, because if they're too long... Oh, that was quick. There we go. Very much. Good evening, everyone. I'm new to this. Hello. As a parent of... sorry, can you hear me? Yes. As a parent of a 3-year-old at one of the local authority maintained nursery schools where well over 20% of the children live in temporary accommodation and way over 30%, far higher often, of the children have special educational needs, meaning they will not
They will not find another early years educator in the borough if they can't go there. I have been on the picket line with my 3-year-old supporting the teachers with dozens of strikes this year, despite running my own business, because these maintained nurseries are facing cuts proposed by this Labour council, with parents and teachers and governors say leave those children without any safe early years education. That is in the face of the largest expansion of early years education in a generation, when these nurseries should be playing an outstanding pioneer role. Less than 3 months ago, Fleur Anderson tweeted a photo of her supporting the nursery, saying they must have an increase in funding, and yet now they are facing a huge decrease that leaves them unsafe. What specific actions would the candidates take to ensure these irreplaceable community assets, Ofsted rated outstanding, continue to support children to thrive, including ensuring their funding, so that we don't all pay for it down the line? And if any of you are on that Twitter X thing, please do look at Fleur's post on the 7th of March, bother her about it, because if you're like me, you're wondering what Labour stand for. If they don't support 2-year-olds who are in temporary accommodation, that's a good place to start.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Will you agree to support state-maintained early years education? Let's start with,
There you go.
Fargo.
Yeah, thank you for the question. This is a reflection of what's going on in society here. As I stated, 6th richest economy in the world, and we've got 20% of people in temporary accommodation. We've got children going to school hungry. We've got crumbling schools. So this is why we need to have a redistribution of wealth. We take a pause. We tax the top earners. And we reinvest in our schools. The Green Party want to have free childcare for everybody over 9 months old, right? And it works in Finland, and by doing this, it gives the children the step up in life that they need, and it gives them the ability to have a good start in life. Also to have a breakfast for all kids. Also, we want to reinvest in all the schools in the country, and we want to decrease the ratio of teachers to children in all the schools. So again, it all comes back down to we've got this very inequality, the society that we're living in now. And also with the schools as well. By going and tackling the ecological climate emergency, part of it is we want to bring children back to nature and protect nature and have more children actually experience nature, and we want to get rid of Ofwat, so we're not burdening children with these rules, and we want to have all universities free, so back to how it used to be, not putting people into boxes and having £40,000–50,000 of debt when they come out of colleges. Thank you.
No, as a single issue candidate, it's not really appropriate for me to be starting to talk about Putney issues of that sort, although I've got 4 grandchildren across the river, and I understand your problems very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think there should be creches available for all on demand. Simple as that. If you don't have facilities for children, then how can people raise children? There are lots of single mothers and so on. They need facilities. I remember I lived in East Germany. East Germany was said to be a basket case. But in East Germany, they had 24-hour creches. 24-hour creches. You could take the child any time of the, you could work at night and take your child there. And they had sleeping places for them and everything. So the idea that society like Britain with enormous wealth can't do something like that is just preposterous. And so it's about the emphasis which we place in society on human beings. And the emphasis at the moment is entirely on machinery, technology, the latest geek stuff, the latest modernity, and that also should be removed. I agree with you about taking them to nature, but also integrating them with society as a whole. Take them to factories, workplaces, the post office, get them to know how society functions, how to break it apart mentally, to be able to understand how this society functions, how this city functions. That's what children need to learn.
Yeah, so I'm going to stand up so I can see you. So you're talking about Eastwood, right? Yeah, so I was actually out there talking to Evelyn last week, and I can't remember the names of 2 other lovely women about this precise issue.
Patronising.
What? I can't remember their names?
Lovely women.
Well, they are lovely women. I'm sorry, they were lovely women, I can't help you. They're really low, I just don't remember their names. Anyway, it is appalling. They've justified it by saying, oh, well, we haven't got the numbers, and that's just straight out not true. What they did is they didn't approve another teacher, and they said, oh, the numbers are going down, but actually you've got to have a ratio, especially in the SEND school. So the ratio came down, and still the numbers are dropping. It's a complete nonsense. And the councillors, they had a meeting with the councillors didn't even send them a summary of their meeting notes, which is basic for a councillor. The MP, Fleur, she turned up, did nothing, sent one letter which she posted on social media, did nothing, and I said, look, I'm not sure what I can do. We've got 2 weeks to the election, and basically the school's shut down in a month, so there's nothing I can do right now. What I will do, whether I'm MP or not, is I will dig into this and I will hammer on the council, because this was a very bad decision. It shouldn't have happened, and there is so few non-private schools that offer that kind of care, and it's appalling, and we should really be upset about what the council's done and the fact that the MP failed us and the councillors failed us, and they've failed the Autumn Estate as well. They do a lot of childcare on the Autumn Estate, so it's appalling. What would the Lib Dems do? Free school meals for children in poverty. What they would do is take off this 20% tax on private education, which everyone says, oh, it's like Eton. No, it is not. Most SEND schools are private. Most schools that are outside the norm are private schools. You put 20% tax on it, you'll shut those schools down. We would stop that nonsense as well, and I've run out of time.
Your time's up.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And Peter.
Well, I have to say that I would agree with a lot of what the candidate has said, and I would further go by saying that when you have a Labour government, as we're likely to have, a Labour mayor, a Labour council, all the more arguments that I've been making that you need to have a member of parliament from a different persuasion. Because like the Liberal candidate, I would work and poke at the council to do more. And he makes a very good point about many of these specialist schools being private, and they will be hit hard by a 20% increase in taking away the tax exemption of VAT. So I would also be working with the council to prevent the closure or the reduction of services. And it's easy for an individual single person, but if you elect us as an MP, we will have a chance to do something, we will have some power. If you have a Labour MP, they won't be able to do as much because she will be within the system and have an interest in not doing as much. So that's what I would do.
Go back to the person who asked the question. Do you feel the question was answered?
But just to be clear, it is a state nursery, not a private nursery, and that's what makes it unique, and there is nowhere else covering that, and you're absolutely right. It's just staggering, but we are all going to pay for this down the line if those children don't get that unique care. Anyone is on X or Twitter, 7th of March, and could bother Fleur about that. I think it might get some traction. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, we've got lots of hands up. You had your hand up very quickly earlier on. So.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. My first thing is that I noticed that it's all males on here. There's not females, which is sad to see. My first thing is I would like to know what it is that you're all going to do with regard to Ofwat. I think that it should be disbanded for the harm that it's caused to the population of this country. I think it's shameful that we in Britain are promoting water that is filled with feces. That's wrong. I'd like to know what you're all going to do about the top 1% of the country, the millionaires, billionaires who are raking in the money and leaving the country and leaving this country in a worse state than what it should be in. I want to know if you're going to encourage them to empty their offshore bank accounts, bring it back into the country, the profits that are being made by the utility companies, by the billionaires themselves, to build the country and let the wealth trickle down to everybody, not just the few at the top. And I'd like to know what you're also going to do with regard to no, I'll leave that one actually.
In case people couldn't hear at the back, there's a two-pronged.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay, I'll just quickly summarise. A two-pronged question. What would the panel do about Ofwat, and also about the top 1% in the country making all the money and basically leaving the country, this is what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, so let's start with Kieran, you can start this one.
Sure, well, you've hit on the Lib Dem sweet topic, which is sewage. So what do you do about Ofwat? You disband it and you put in place a new regulator with new powers, number one. Number two, you put a sewage tax on the profits that they've been making, and then you put that back into funding of the system.
So you'd prosecute them
But it's not done.
for damaging the health of the people of the
Prosecution's a
country.
different issue. Prosecution's a different issue. It is.
Prosecute
That's
them
why.
I mean,
Prosecute them for what?
they've not done anything
For
illegal.
the damage
You
that.
have no evidence. It's like going to court and going, this person's so and so.
But there's proof people have been sick and dying from having to swallow.
Bring the evidence, put it in front
No,
of
okay, so the answer is very simple. They've not done anything against the law, and the reason they've not done anything against the law is because the Conservative government allowed for the law to be like that. That's the truth, that's the reality. Okay, so what do? You change the law. That's what the Lib Dems would do. You would have binding targets and get rid of sewage. You would turn water companies into public benefit companies. Basically, that means you get somebody from the community, you get people onto the board so they can only make decisions in sort of the wider interest. I'm actually on the board of a public benefit company myself, nominatesruns.uk, and it works.
But there's no women here. There's no women here.
Let him
Okay.
finish, then you can come back. Okay, so we will come back to you after.
I think sewage affects men and women, to be honest with you. But okay. So, and then extra funding for the Environment Agency as well. So, yes, it has been a disaster. Yes, we would fix it. Labour, by the way, wouldn't. They would stick with the same regulatory policy. They'd just say, oh, we'll fine them more. That hasn't worked. Conservatives won't make any changes. Greens thinks we should nationalise it. I don't think that would work. But I've run out of time.
You can have another 10 seconds because you were interrupted.
But the way that it's structured, if you nationalise it, you're basically wasting a lot of money. The better thing to do is to basically tell them to bet public benefit companies, and then that way it works without basically wasting billions of pounds.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Michael.
I think the water and all the key resources in society should be taken into public ownership. And they should be taken into public ownership and placed under democratic control, so that bureaucrats don't just serve private interests who might be siphoning resources off the public sector. So the economy, basically, in my view, the decisive levers of economic power, including water, gas, electricity, and the key banks, need to be in public ownership, so you can mobilise the resources of the economy to serve the needs of the people. And we've had 30 years and more of constant privatisation, to the point where those organisations that are called publicly owned are actually privately owned, like the NHS. They all talk about the NHS, the sacred cow of the NHS. We need to throw more money at the NHS. What they mean now, when Labour says more money for the NHS, they mean more money to the private sector, siphoned through the NHS to the big pharma companies, to the private enterprises that have taken control, and the building companies that have taken control of the NHS. That's why we need to have an overview of the entire economy of Britain, and to take all those sectors that affect the lives of the people to the detriment of the people, all of them into public ownership.
I was at university in the 60s, or late 60s, when we went through the whole nationalisation period, and I'll tell you, it was an unhappy time. Maybe it's right for some things now, but I worry about that. I just want to remind you, I'm the only person here who's got, government's all about choosing where to spend. Going back into the European Union, we know it's lost us £100 billion a year in output. It's cost every one of you £4,000 individually. Why don't we try and get a little bit of money back?
Thank you very much. Okay.
So yeah, look, this is an absolute disgrace. Our rivers, our seas, we can't swim in them, we can't drink our water, we're getting polluted, and we're paying people profit. We're the most bizarre scenario where with one of the countries in the world that privatise the most basic necessity, which is water. And what do we do? We give profits, and the people we're giving profits to, they're sovereign funds. So UAE, 93% is all owned by foreign companies, right? And we have to pay. The rivers are polluted to such an extent that some of them, so 100% of there's traces of chemicals. Over 90% is unsafe for swimming, right? And what we need to do, we need to take them back in control, and instead of fining them, we convert the fines into shares, and we keep on doing that. And what we can do is we can buy them back at the rate we sold them, which is about 5 billion. and let them go bust. They got, I think it's about 60, 70 billion in debt, right? We as taxpayers should not bail them out, okay? And just a quick one, rail. We need to renationalise rail, because rails are like super expensive. And on top of that, we have to look at energy companies as well. We spend 400 billion a year on fossil fuels in this country. 1.1 billion a day leaves the UK. And if we had, if we went and actually put in renewables and redesigned our whole system, regardless of what you think about climate change, it's the most economical thing that we can do and create jobs and create wealth in this country. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I agree with most of what people have said. And what I say, which is different, is that I agree also that Ofwat has no teeth and has not been made to do what it should do, which is to prosecute people for filthy water, to stop them selling off the assets so that they can make more profits, taking the profits abroad and giving the shareholders the feedback and the profits and money, and that should stop. And if Ofwat cannot be corrected, then, as was suggested, it should be done away with, and either a stronger body should be brought in to grip it and control it, and make them pay back some of this 60 billion in debt, which I agree is also disgraceful. And that leads on to talking about how the NHS, which is linked to health as well, and the NHS is always sacrosanct, but it does mean there's no point in just pumping endless more money into it. There is scope for making the management of it less cumbersome, smaller, more efficient, and putting more of those resources into the front line to reduce waiting times and things like that.
Thank you very much. Do you feel your question has been addressed? I mean, it was a two-pronged question.
But yes, no, I'll leave it like that.
You leave it like that.
Someone
Okay,
else
thank you
have
very
a
much. Somebody at the back, we'll go right to the back. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Assalamualaikum. Peace be upon you. My question is regarding world peace, and I would just like to give some quotes from a key person who's working for peace in the world today. It's relevant for all of us, regardless of our gender, our beliefs, our ethnic backgrounds. World peace affects us all. First of all, it is natural to crave a life of peace and contentment, free from all forms of conflict. Everyone yearns to live in a place of peace and security. This is a quote from Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad. He also says, we must always remember that a tense state of affairs has the potential to very suddenly explode or inflame. Small and seemingly insignificant matters, if not handled delicately, ultimately prove to be the basis for extremely dangerous results. History bears witness to this, and certainly this is what we have seen in the First and Second World Wars. What kind of future will we leave behind to those who are yet to come? Instead of bestowing a legacy of peace and prosperity to our future generations, our parting gift to them will be nothing except death, destruction, and misery. Certainly, it is my grave fear that today's geopolitical tensions could spiral out of all control and ultimately lead to a nuclear war.
Well said.
He also said, as wars rage in Europe, the Middle East, and elsewhere, many people are now raising their alarm about the possibility of a global war in which the use of nuclear powers would wreak unimaginable levels of havoc and destruction in the world. But despite this realization, many still seem unwilling to consider what must be done to end these conflicts. He has also written to world leaders urging the need for peace. And he also says, for as long as world leaders do not courageously strive for a ceasefire, they are invariably responsible for taking the world towards destruction. Big powers think this will remain contained to that area, but those who are wise have started saying that the war will not remain confined to just that region. Rather, it will spread abroad to their countries as well. My message to the world is to look at tomorrow and not just today. Let us leave behind a legacy of hope and opportunity for our children, rather than burdening them with the horrific consequences of our mistakes. Do not consider the problems and conflicts of today's world to be minor or insignificant, but instead strive your utmost and make every possible effort.
We need a question.
Okay,
Yeah,
I would like to.
we're serious, mate.
You are absolutely right to point that out. Forgive me.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm passionate about this.
No,
Forgive
and
me.
it's lovely.
I'm
and
sorry,
it's
but
what we do
time
in
is
the question
precious.
because yes.
Yes, it is to ask, please, what each of the candidates who are very bravely and courageously speaking before us today. It's not easy, and thank you for coming and addressing us. What is it that you would do, please, for the sake of world peace? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Okay. Let's start this time with who has not started. Michael, you've not started.
Okay. When I was at college at South Thames College when I was 17, the threat of nuclear war was hanging over our head. We organised demonstrations and protests in Hyde Park. We mobilised the students there, and I've been doing that ever since. That's what I do. Yeah, that's my life. But the problem at the moment is, in the last 5 years, after the coronavirus crisis was declared over in February 2022, a shift was taking place. A shift that obviously a lot of people went along with, because obviously it was superior to sitting there being locked at home and constantly being paranoid about the pandemic. Suddenly there was a shift to war against Russia. And we are sending British weapons, British arms, British machinery, equipment, technology to Ukraine. And we are prepared to have as many Ukrainians die as is necessary for NATO's prestige and authority. And I do not believe there is any justification for a continuation of that war. And I think the war is being continued only to promote the interests of NATO and the powers that control NATO. I'm old enough to remember, I lived in East Germany when the Berlin Wall fell, and the year that followed that, the negotiations that followed that, they swore blind that NATO will not move 1 centimetre east of the Oder-Neisse boundary. I'll just take a couple more seconds just to get on to the key question of our time. The battle in Gaza, of course, is barbarity untold in modern times. And Britain is in hock. The Tory party and the Labour Party are in hock and under the control or influence and dominance of the Israel lobby. Keir Starmer is an agent, if you like, for the Israel lobby.
Thank you very much.
Sense at last, thank you.
I think in your good words you outlined many of the problems facing the world today, and what are we going to do about it? So one of the first things we should continue to do is to reduce the number of nuclear weapons held by all countries, and also prevent countries like North Korea developing weapons, especially when they have a slightly dodgy or useful. So we should be reducing the number of nuclear weapons, but we definitely don't want to use them. We need to also, at the same time, maintain our own weapons until that is succeeded with. We need to maintain our own conventional defence forces because they've reached a dangerously low level, which is why everybody in Europe, including NATO, is being urged to spend more. The war of Russia on Ukraine is disgraceful, and to a certain extent, you're right, the West is sitting back and letting the Ukrainians take the strain here. But the problem is, I've only got 30 seconds left, is that by weak governments from the American president, Putin wasn't Putin, as I used their pronunciation, was not deterred from invading. But we need to make sure that Ukraine does not give in, so we do need to support them. And the other thing you mentioned, which I'll just, I think that's enough because my time is up. I can come back to that if you like.
Thank you. Fergal.
Yeah, so look, what's going on is super scary. I think everyone's kind of feeling the tension in the world, and the atrocities are unfolding in front of our eyes, like the horrors of war. We get to see the machines behind it. You know, the UK government not immediately going for a ceasefire, still selling arms to Israel, and you just take a step back and you go, this is murderous, is what's going on here. And on top of that, you know, the arms race with nuclear weapons. We need to decrease the amount of nuclear weapons. We also, years ago, one of the first protests I did about 8 years ago was with the campaign against the arms trade. Here in Putney is where the largest arms trade in the world is organised, just like Putney Bridge. ISIS is just there. Shouldn't say it, but spray paint from the ground, pointing at the building. We need to be realistic about this. With climate change, we're going to see more people on the move, more tensions. UK government, French government, all the big armies in the world see it as the biggest threat facing humanity, and they're preparing for war. And we need to do everything possible. We need to human rights. We need to make sure that none of our human rights are eroded, and we need to stop arming these countries. Questions?
Thank you very much for what you said. It's very important that you concentrate our minds on that. Let's bear in mind that this is a really good place to be having this discussion. This is one of the most gloriously inclusive places in the whole world. Many people in the world are hugely jealous. In this constituency, 38% of the people who live here were born outside the country. Over in my constituency across the river, it's 48%. And people live happily together. Around the world, people will be so jealous of that. So we've got an example to show people. Now, the problem is nationalism. Donald Trump started, the previous American presidents, they're worried about the collapse of their influence in the world. They're becoming nationalistic. We've had an element of that here with over-nationalistic thinking. We're seeing a bit of it now in Europe. Now, nationalism is only 200 years old. Most of the states of Europe didn't exist 200 years ago. There were other forms of politics. Maybe nationalism is coming to an end. Maybe we can start to rethink. Now, there are one or two things we can actually do right now if we want to achieve that. First, we reduce the influence of borders. The European Union is a contribution towards that. It's also a problem because in a way it's creating another form of border, but it's a contribution towards that way. The next thing we can do is increase, the authority of the United Nations, which means we've got to give up our veto, we've got to give up permanent members in the United Nations, we've got to make certain the United Nations has got judicial authority around the world. Those are two things that we might be able to do to help world peace.
Thank you. Kieran?
Yeah, so thank you for your question. You're absolutely right to be passionate about it. We live in pretty unusual, slightly dangerous times, let's be honest. When it comes to Gaza, myself and my party are pretty clear about this. We called for an immediate ceasefire in November, a long time ago, echoing the UN's language. We would call for a ban on arms sales to Israel. We would, what are the other things we do? We would support the UN, the ICC, and any prosecutions that they choose to bring against anybody they choose to bring it against. We would recognize the Palestinian state as soon as possible. We would impose sanctions on some of the far-right Israeli leaders that have said things that are beyond the pale. In terms of the wider world, we'd support Ukraine. Putin is an ongoing and very persistent threat to the world. We would support the Uyghurs in China. We would support Sudan, Afghanistan, all these places where terrible things are happening. We would support and push end to the death penalty across the world, and support and push an end to the use of torture across the world, and do everything. I would stand up for every issue that came up in front of me in which there is a major problem, a major dreadful occurrence or abuse of rights. I would stand up and speak out against it as strongly as possible.
I'll go back to the lady to ask the question. Do you feel that they've addressed your question?
Thank you so much indeed.
Okay, thank you very much. Somebody, I think, in the middle. yes, you had your hand a few
May
times.
I please respectfully ask the people on the panel how they feel about the stranglehold of the Israel lobbyists, because they're a nightmare in America. In fact, it's a genocide. It's a genocide that's going on. It's not a war. And it's absolutely outrageously appalling, and it's going to affect us all. It's not just they're not going to limit themselves just to people in Palestine, and they're in the Labour Party, they're in the Conservative Party, they're in every party. MPs are being basically bought off. People like David Lammy, £70,000 to pay off here, another pay off there.
Are these Jews you're talking about? Can I ask? Very quickly, are these Jews?
She says, she said excuse me.
I'm sorry, but I think
Excuse me.
very
I'm
fine.
asking a serious question. She said at the beginning, sorry. If we have arguments, then nobody can hear. She said at the beginning the Israeli lobby. That's what she said.
Israeli lobby,
which is a different thing.
And Flo Anderson is a friend of Israel.
It is a different
by the
thing.
way.
So thank you. I think we have our question. Is that okay? You've got a question? Okay.
Yeah, that's the
So
question.
what do you feel about the stranglehold, you say, of the Israeli lobby? Now, you have not started first, Bill. Would you like to address that question?
I am I'm horrified by what is going on there. We're all aware that the Israeli population and the Palestinian population are effectively exactly the same people, and somehow or other they've been divided and they've been allowed to fight each other. And you know, I just got an odd feeling. You know, we talk about families where there's been abusive, where kids have been abused. Kids sometimes grow up, the ones who've been abused, to be abusers themselves. And I have a horrible suspicion that's happening a little bit internationally.
Very much. Kieran.
Yeah, so I think the best way to approach it is to talk in terms of values and principles that you can all agree on. And then you can apply it equally and fairly to what's happening around the world. So, all life is precious. No life is worth more than any other life. No one should be denied their dignity or their safety, regardless of who they're governed by. No one should be allowed to escape responsibility for their actions. And I'll always vote according to my values and principles. And the Liberal Democrats, I think, are the only political party who put equality and diversity and inclusion at the heart of their approach to things. In fact, it's in the sort of liberal manifesto that we all adhere to. So what do I think about this particular situation? I think that the Lib Dems, I think that large, powerful groups try to lobby and influence large, powerful groups. I think that's what happens all the time. The Lib Dems, however, will never be lobbied or held to account by lobbies or by foreign governments. It won't happen. It's not in our nature. We won't do it, and we won't end up in positions like our MP ended up in, where they abstained from the ceasefire vote. Thanks.
Thank you.
I keep saying I agree with everybody else to a certain extent. I think, as far as this is concerned, what's happened since the 7th of October has been horrible. What happened on the 7th of October was horrible. And the only people who can really bring a ceasefire are the Americans, encouraged by ourselves and other Western nations. And it's rather sad that over the last 2 weeks, because of the diversion of everybody thinking about the election, the Gaza-Palestinian question has dropped off the front pages. The Israelis are continuing to bomb. And I don't think the Labour Party have a very good record for Jewish relations. And we've had several problems over the past years, as we all know about. But I come back to the central assertion that it's only America, whoever is the president, and Biden should be doing it now, that can bring about a ceasefire. And what happens to Hamas, it's taken him too long not to destroy Hamas. And if he goes on, you know, the genocide in Palestine will only continue. They have almost agreed as two-state solution, but whether that's good or bad is not for me or us to decide, because encouraged by the Saudis and the Qataris, you know, Israel and Palestine had almost agreed to go forward, which is why Hamas actually struck on the 7th of October to put paid to that, what could have been a solution, which is very difficult. And the last thing I would say, is that NATO is an important organisation. We're a member of it. It should not be, I agree, expanding eastwards, but on the other hand, we need to make sure that Ukraine does not lose in a bad way. Otherwise, Putin will keep coming, and he'll be over the next border or trying it out in Estonia and Finland.
Yeah, so look, super important question going on here is like, how is this happening? And the reason being is there's foreign governments giving lots of money that's influencing our politicians. And you follow the money, and there's reasons for it, there's political, economical reasons that they're allowing this to happen, right? And it needs to stop. And what they do is the lobby, the Israeli lobby, they close you down if you criticise, right? So I went to Israel years ago with a Jewish friend. We crossed through the West Bank and we got detained for hours, right? Questions. Spent a week there, got stopped 3 times, and I got to see firsthand what was going on, the division between people who are actually born there, who are not allowed to vote in their own country, the way they're treated, right? I've gone and there's 2 things. I clicked to like on Facebook about these Israeli soldiers who shot kids playing football, shot their legs, and I reposted saying this is an absolute disgrace, 1 or 2 other comments, and I signed a petition with the Green Party with 100 people to have a definition of what the actual state of Israel. And because I did that, I got branded as one of the 100 the people who got branded as being anti-Semite. And this is cancel culture. You can't criticise something. You know, so like we have to have an honest look at it and go, why is this going on? You know, I've got nothing against Jewish people, but I've got a problem with a state of Israel that's bombing innocent children, you know, and destroying us like genocide in front of us, you know. And just one last point as well. It's also going on with Russia, like Russian money coming in here, and you know, buying peerage. You know, we just need to like stamp all that out.
As a former Labour Party member for decades, this is central to what has happened in British politics. Today we have the Labour Party on the cusp of taking power based on a collapse of the Tory vote, with less votes supposedly in the opinion polls than Jeremy Corbyn got in 2017, and with a leader who tried to sabotage and undermine Jeremy Corbyn, and then in conjunction with the Israel lobby, who pay him directly, by the way. Starmer is directly paid by the Israel lobby, who, by the way, the people who pay in Starmer are engaged in settlements in the West Bank. They're directly connected to those operations. That's why Starmer doesn't reveal his funding sources. Now, Starmer has been carrying out a policy up until February this year. I'm not saying a word about what was going on in Gaza, not a word. When thousands of people were being killed, Starmer turned around and said, oh, they have a right, I believe they have a right to cut off water and electricity. War crimes. In other words, we have in preparation a Prime Minister who is supportive of war crimes, and that means he will himself support the conducting of war crimes around the world. And his advisor, Tony Blair, Magnuson. These were the people who committed the war crimes in Afghanistan and in Iraq. So there's a pattern here. Now these people then expelled Jeremy Corbyn, who was the most popular leader in the Labour Party in decades and decades. Now he's standing independently in Islington North. I'll take a few more seconds if you don't mind. In Islington North. And the Labour Party has been captured by the Israel lobby and by big business. That's the truth of the matter. And it needs to be purged out of British politics. Because otherwise, how can a foreign power exercise so much control that they remove the leader of the party that's about to become the government? It's a farce.
He's a Tony Blair, war criminals.
Is it make these 20 seconds?
towards the back. So yes.
The politics of division is becoming ever more popular in our society. How will you and your party help bring the country and community together?
Politics and all divisions, how do you bring the country together? Right, let's start this time with Fergal.
Here we go. So yeah, so this is super annoying for the fact that like I'm standing as a Green Party. We've got smaller parties here. We're here in the hustings. The big parties don't turn up. That shows us that our political system is broken. First past the post. The only countries got first past the post in Europe is England, Wales, and Belarus. Right? We got vote swapping. We got tactical voting. Right? What's that about? Most people who vote in this country, their vote means nothing. So if we bring in proper proportional representation, right, that your vote counts, it will go a long way towards that. We have to readdress the system. We have to get rid of the House of Lords. It's hereditary peers. People just because they're born gets to vote how we live our lives. You know. So get rid of the House of Lords, redesign it. We're elected. You know, and we need to get citizens' assemblies and people's assemblies because we're going to face multiple crises. And we are. I don't want to go on about it, but like we are going to have problems in the future. And to do that, we need to get communities together, citizens' assemblies, people's assemblies. Redesign our political system, and most importantly, we need to get money out of politics, right? And get money out of politics, get influence out of politics, and we'll go a long way towards kind of rebalancing the system. You know, and also, could you imagine if we had PR? I'd have to work with all these, and we'd have to get along, and we'd have to like sort things out. And I reckon we could get probably quite a lot of stuff sorted.
Thank you very much.
I agree with you entirely. How do we do that? How do we try and get ourselves come more together? If I talk just from the Brexit point of view, I'm very worried that all the people that supported Brexit to some extent did so or a lot of people did so from an economic point of view, and a lot of people opposed it on some sort of psychological idea about a strength or value in Britain, and let's get at the liberals, let's get at those who have. And that's my responsibility is to try and say, okay, we've all got something coming here, we've all got some benefit, let's try and work together. And I'm enthusiastic for your sort of views.
Thank you very much. Kieran.
Yeah, so it's a good, it's a good question because it has been pretty miserable. I think we can agree, and we seem to be lurching from one group of people to another group of people. With short-term views, pushing their short-term goals, and in time for the next election, and fighting the next election. It's a mess. The answer is, Fergal's quite right, proportional representation, which sounds like a big fancy word, but it basically means that your vote counts, and that what people in this country believe and how they're split up are the people that end up making the rules, making the laws. Now, the big advantage of that is you do actually have to work with one another to figure out how to get forward, because if you don't, nothing gets passed, so you have to figure it out. Now, we have it in Wales, and we have it in Scotland already, and it happens in most of Europe already, and it works. So that's how you do it, is you allow your vote to count, so more people vote, you allow there to be more parties, and we've got 7 in this one, and then people vote for what they believe most passionately in, and then you have to find, and that's what politics should be, you have to find the compromises that work for everybody, and that's how you avoid this very unpleasant partisan behaviour that we're seeing in the United States, and that's why we've ended up where we are in the States. So I'm standing as a third party, and if the Lib Dems get power, they will go out of their way to give more power to other groups, because that's the philosophy. Thanks.
Thank you.
We live in a society that ultimately is divided between those above and those below. That's the fact of the matter. And those below constitute 80 to 90% of the population. So the key question for me is, how do you unify that 80 to 90% of the population? Now, I've been speaking at Speaker's Corner since 1985, the end of it. And there are Muslims, Christians, Marxists, gays and lesbians, you name it. We've had every single flat earthers, we've had every single group come there and speak. And over the years, once in a while, only once in a while is there a fight. Only once in a while. And they'll be in their face, they'll be shouting, and in the evening, we go home and we're back the next week for the same thing. And ultimately, in my opinion, the divisions that are being stoked up by certain interest groups are not real divisions in society. There is no division between the Muslim people in Britain and the Christians in Britain. There is no division between black people and white people, or between Jews and Christians, or Jews and Muslims. These are stoked up and initiated and orchestrated by interest groups trying to position themselves politically in order to turn one group against another. And we saw this on the demonstrations about Gaza and Palestine. I went on one of those demonstrations and Suella Braverman was screaming about there being hate marches. There were plenty of Jews on the demonstrations, and there were more white people on the demonstration than there were Middle Eastern or people from regions which would traditionally be Muslim. Yeah. And just a couple more seconds. And so the divisions are being stoked up, fanned and flared by certain interest groups. And of course, because we don't have power, power comes from below, from mass meetings, from demonstrations, from organisation, from discussion, debate. That's where the power of the people begins to overcome those divisions. When we don't participate together, the divisions emerge and can be played on by different people.
Well, I believe in freedom of speech, as everybody has been saying that they do as well. And that means that we have in this country, as you were just saying, much more freedom of speech than in many other countries. So I support that. The two big parties, Labour and Conservative, are not in favour of proportional representation because it doesn't suit them, and they want to have this business of alternative power. You know, the Conservatives for 14 years, Labour for the 13 years before that, Mrs Thatcher before that. And at the moment, with Labour looking like 40%, and Liberal and Reform and the others having 20% each, none of the other parties are going to be able to form a government. And that's why the only way if we are going to change this would be to try and have some form of mixed representation, because Labour and the Conservatives are never going to agree to total proportional representation. So you talk about the policies of division, that is one way to bring it forward. We must safeguard the freedom of speech, and we must continue to encourage, as was said, you know, Muslim and Jew and Christian all getting on together, hopefully respecting each other's cultures, but also supporting the cultures of this country, and not forming themselves into little groups that don't take part with everybody else.
Do we feel the question was answered? Yeah,
yes.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Me?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Yes.
Then we'll come back over here.
Yes, since COVID, I have noticed a decline in democracy in many organisations. This doesn't seem to be mentioned in the election at all, but many organisations, they are having meetings where you can no longer meet in person. They go online. The elderly generation are effectively left out, cannot participate, and this is wrong.
Yeah.
And basically, there needs to be a law to ensure that, especially one large organisation is having a special general meeting only online. I'm a member of it, I won't name it, but another member, elderly member, he was almost in tears saying, an important issue, I will not be able to take part because I cannot, you know, at my age, deal with the online. I normally go to the meetings, but I can't take part. And, you know, this is wrong. So we need a law effectively to ban, I think, online-only members' meetings of organisations. That's what I would say.
So, Peter.
Well, I'm one of that older generation, so I agree with you. I'm fed up with Zoom meetings. You can get a lot more across when you have a physical meeting, and actually now that we're out of COVID mostly, there's no reason why we shouldn't go back to this old way of politics. And I pay tribute to you and your organisation for having us all, and I pay tribute to the other board members for bothering to turn up, unlike Fleur and Lee, who make some sad excuses for not coming along. So I return to the original thing. You have a real choice here. You can vote for this, and you need to vote for somebody who's going to be a really powerful MP for you. One or two people here have complained about Fleur. It's not fair for me to complain about her in her absence, but if you feel she's not doing a good job, you really do have a choice now. So make sure you vote for me or one of the other people.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's have Michael, you can come.
These events, I believe, are the way an election should be held. You should have meetings, and I tried to get meeting rooms. I booked all these meeting rooms because under election law, any political party or any candidate can book rooms that are available in the community. Unfortunately, there are less and less that are available in the community that are publicly funded. And those who are public funded, often I tried to contact them and they said there's a private organisation that's in charge of renting out. And they had no idea that there was an electoral law that says you have the right to rent this for the cost of the lighting and heating and perhaps a little bit of staffing costs. They had no idea, even the library had no idea. They sent me a bill for £900. And eventually they did slash it, they were very polite, they did. I sent the email to the electoral office and they wrote to them and changed it. But essentially what has happened is big tech have tried to turn society into something they control for their own interests. Every one of us, when we use our mobile phone, is being monitored and spied on in a way that in Stalinist Russia or Mao's China was never done. We are watched every minute of the day on our mobile phones. And this is not being watched for your benefit. It's being watched to control you, monitor you, and shape you and your children's future. So we really need to take a step back and take control over our lives and separate the technology from man and bring man to the forefront. Meetings, assemblies, groups, associations, communication, even love affairs nowadays, they're going online. This should be abandoned, and human beings should be primarily making contact with each other in real life, and only as a very secondary question, the machine should be used for occasional things that assist when we can't meet in real life.
Yeah.
I actually agree with quite a lot of that. It's the world we're moving into now, like this, with big tech and computers and everything, we're losing our identity.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, like cutting funding to community centres, to libraries, to public spaces, you know, that's eroding our freedoms. You know, it's we need to get people back out, back talking. Meetings like this. Thank you very much for organising this. This is great. You know, great conversation. We need to have more. We've got a broken society, and the way we mend it is getting people with different opinions and coming together and talking about things. You know, we need more of this. You know, it's like we're not all going to agree, but if we don't have the public spaces, we can't do it. And having it online, just not on part of Just Stop Oil, right? But I know several people are. They've started arresting the young kids, right, for being on Zoom meetings. Right, this is the thought police. This is 1984. This is going on now. People going to jail and preempting crimes. So we've got to really think about like how we're actually going to run our societies in the future, and also moving forward, like with the ecological climate crisis. What we need to do is we need to have more citizens' assemblies and people's assemblies. And we get together collectively, we decide what we want to do locally, and this is how we should be running politics.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. I sympathise with you. Maybe we're broadly the same generation. There are one. We would also remember there are counterbalancing benefits. I mean, the fact that so many people around the world have got these things.
Yes.
It's very much more difficult for people to rig elections and things like that. We've seen that in Pakistan recently. We saw it in Tanzania. It's very much more difficult for governments to take control now because that technology gives the disenfranchised people a little bit more influence. So we've just got to bear that in mind. And on the other side.
Kieran.
Yes, I think we're all in pretty fierce agreement. There is a big difference between an online meeting and an in-person, as we are all experiencing right here, right?
Yeah.
This would be far less interesting, would be far less back and forth if we're all on our computers right now looking at the screen. I think we've all experienced that for a couple of years. There is obviously massive uses for Zoom meetings. I do them all the time, incredibly good. But if you're making decisions about things, and if you want public input, then yes, we should be holding meetings, there should be the option to do both, and we can't easily do both. The answer in sort of in policy walk terms is model articles. So you have model articles, sort of the default stuff that you set up when you set up a corporation or an organisation, and often they update. I know the organisation I'm on the board for, we recently updated to the most recent ones, and it did include in those modern articles the ability to only hold meetings online. So that's now the default position where you can only hold meetings online. I think you make a good point in that if it might be worthwhile pushing for a push like to change those model articles if any decision is being important, or if a stakeholder or shareholder feels there needs to be a physical meeting, then there should be a requirement. I think that's good. I think that's a good point. I'd support that. I'd pick up on that.
Thank you.
Have we addressed your?
Yes, I think.
Right, front, because you've put your hand up so many times.
I'm a retired now career nurse, and the NHS is dear to my heart. But there are so many other things in the world more important to me. And I'm delighted that the floor has been asking questions about international issues. I have a simple question, and it was a question put to the West by Vladimir Putin. And I'd like each of the panel to answer it specifically. He said to the West, "You didn't want us as your friend, but why did you make us your enemy?" Please answer that directly.
You didn't want us as your friend, why did you make us your enemy?
Yes.
From Putin.
Yeah.
Right, let's start with Heiko.
1989, there was talk that with the fall of the Berlin Wall, there would be a massive peace dividend. The nuclear weapons wouldn't be needed anymore, and we could spend that money on welfare and the improvement of the living standards of the people. And there would be a Marshall Plan to develop the former Soviet bloc. So much for that. They went there and plundered Russia, and they had a 500-day plan. The guy was called Jeffrey Sachs. He's a bit of a liberal now, but a liberal in another sense. Bit of a liberal now, but at the time he went there with a 500-day plan, which they took to Igor Gaidar, the Prime Minister at the time, in order to privatise everything within 500 days. What happened was that because people didn't have any food, they gave them a little voucher. With this voucher, they could get $25 for it. They get $25 for all the property in Russia. And that was then transferred to a handful of oligarchs who went and bought football clubs in England and so on and so forth. That's how power was transferred. And so then, having alienated the population, there was a turn against that in Russia after 1996, and then a big economic collapse. They internalised the problems in Russia, and then they said, well, it's enough. We've been shat on enough. Excuse my French. We've been shat on enough. And then we're now going to defend our own position. And then encroach from one country after another around the outside of the former Soviet Union, which they promised never to encroach. They've encroached right up into the border. And of course the Russians behaved the way they did. Everyone knew, NATO knew, everyone knew that Russia would respond the way they did to the threats from NATO. So it's ridiculous what they're arguing.
Well, there has been a peace dividend since the war came down. We have reduced the number of nukes, but we're not in a perfect situation, and weak leadership in the Western nations, particularly in America, has partly caused that. I'm not an admirer of President Putin, and neither is Nigel Farage, although other parties have been working hard to try and show that he is. Putin went into Crimea in 2014 effectively because the West did nothing and sat around for a bit and thought, well, we're not doing very much. Biden fell asleep, and now he's in Ukraine for no very good reason. I know there are large numbers of Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, but they were relatively happy there. And there's no excuse for Putin being there. I agree there is a danger that we in the West are sitting back and letting the poor Ukrainians fight the war, on our behalf and giving them endless weapons to keep them doing that. But I'm afraid that giving in to Putin there is not a solution. So I'm afraid I come back to my original thing. We need to continue to work to reduce the number of nuclear weapons, maintain the balance of power, and come to a solution there and get it addressed.
Thank you. Fergal.
Yeah, so this quote that you come up, we didn't want you as a friend. We got to remember, Putin started this war. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, you know, he decided that he was going to, you know.
Learn your facts, brother.
Well, no, you asked me a question, right? And I'm just saying, like, you looked at, like, you're saying he got poked, and I know you're trying to, like, the whole thing of, like, the encroachment going on and valid points going on, like, of you know, why they reacted. But he still made the decision to start the war, right? And it's like, it's a petrostate, it's vast amount of wealth and money within the country, and we're still funding the war. 20% GDP machine of Russia is the money that we're still buying the oil and gas reserves from the country. So again, if we, you know, we need to be, you know, we need to be working on peace, you know, but the conflict, you know, what's going on is like, it's like, yes, they should have gone, NATO should have gone right up to the border. But the same token, having Putin then start a war and then butchering so many people, if you're a pacifist, is, you know, is totally uncalled for. That's why we need to get rid of petrostates and stop fueling them by buying their oil and gas reserves and move to a sustainable future.
Thank you. Kieran.
Yes, I'm not going to accept any analysis from someone like Putin on any level. The man is a murderer.
So
the
you
man
want
is
nuclear
a
war,
thug.
right? Is that what you want, nuclear war? Because that's what you're going to get.
That's how bullies work.
Yeah,
This
right.
country is famous to stand
Storm
up
shadow
against
missiles
bullies.
arriving on Moscow. What do you think is going to happen to us?
Vladimir Putin has
Not
murdered.
afraid
The
of
reason
nuclear
Vladimir
Excuse me,
Putin.
you've made your point. Let him answer the
The
question.
reason Vladimir Putin is in power is because he's murdered his political rivals. That's why he's in power. He's murdered people in this country. Have you forgotten about that? Murdered people in London, murdered people in Salisbury. People have fled this country from him because he kills everybody that stands up against him. Do I agree with this analysis? No, I do not. Ludicrous.
That's shameful to say.
It is shameful.
Yeah, of your side.
Appalling. The man is a murderer. The man is a threat to this country and the West. I do not accept any analysis from that man. Foolish. Foolish behaviour.
Thank you.
I see
But-
Putin as having. I see Putin as having generated the current conflict for his own benefit. He has been president in Russia for 26 years, I think. He should have been thrown out a long time ago. He's been doing exactly what my colleague over there said. And the only thing that maybe the West has done wrong is to allow the idea that NATO could put weapons in Ukraine. Otherwise, it has been him and Russian people frightened of what was going on, and now even more terrified of what's going on, and they are not in a position to object to it. I find it very difficult to give any credibility to that quotation that you gave.
Now we can come back to you.
Thank you. I forgot to say that I lived in both Moscow and Kiev for many years and worked there. And Russian people admire Putin and recognise that he is a strong leader, which is what the West doesn't like, because we don't have any strong leaders. The Ukraine situation was caused, in my view, and I was there during the so-called Maidan protests, talking to the Ukrainian people, camping out for 3 months on the streets, and it wasn't a sense at all of any real gain for Ukraine to see, or not see, but to look towards the West. They didn't, it's the old story, my enemy's enemy is my friend. That's what caused it. And if the West had not supported the unelected partly fascist groups within the Ukrainian government, like Pravi Sektor and Svoboda, these other groups who were present on the demonstration, then these groups would not have forced through the law that banned the Russian language in the Donetsk region in government buildings. Those buildings are not offices, they're schools, hospitals, polyclinics, bus stations. And so as always, ordinary working class people who had lived peacefully with their ethnic Ukrainian neighbours and with their ethnic Russian Ukrainian.
Until the attack, until the war, until they were attacked.
2 friends of mine were killed
Until they were attacked.
in a Donetsk village, which was ethnic Russian, by the first strike in this conflict, which was Ukrainian militia bombing ethnic Russian Ukrainians.
What's happening now?
Hmm?
What's happening now?
It's a foul, disgusting war, of course.
Hang on, so we can't
But
say
it's
the
only
first
strikes.
when a
Sorry,
quarter of a million.
Forgive me, I've been going on too long.
Yeah, so,
when a quarter of a million people, soldiers on the border, that is the first strike.
okay, so we came back to you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and I think we've probably covered the topic. Yeah, do you want to say something quickly? Very
Yeah,
quickly,
so
10 seconds.
there's a place where we can agree here. Yes, what we're getting, we've ended up in a situation now where we're seeing Ukraine good, Russia bad. That region's history, and we seem to know some about it, is a lot more complicated than that. That's the truth. And it is not black and white. And yes, Ukraine has not been exactly the glowing golden child of the world. This is all true.
Yep.
And yes, there was provocation. And yes, both sides have not exactly shone in this. However, Putin did start that war, and he's still prosecuting that war. He could stop that war, and he should stop that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the panel want to say anything?
Yeah, so just nuclear weapons, right? This is why the Green Party want to stop new nuclear and actually then decrease their nuclear armour. For this very reason, it's this threat that we live under, you know? Nobody wants war, you know? I reckon you guys probably agree on a lot of things, but it's just, we get into these small little details.
I don't agree with that.
No, but what I mean is, I'm guessing that you want peace, you know, and that's what I'm saying. So, but we get tied up like details of like what's going on. We need to stop weaponizing. We need to stop making arms and selling them to regimes. We need to still not funding, you know, the influence that we've done, like the Iraq War, and like you know what we're doing is awful.
Peace is everything. We all want the world.
Yeah.
All has to come down to peace.
Anybody else? Michael, do you want to?
Sorry, just point out that guy's been had his hand up forever, so
Yeah.
he should be honest. We are seeing in Ukraine and elsewhere in the world, coming back to the question you were asking about, a slide towards war where everyone turns around and says, well, they didn't want it, and suddenly you're at war. I remember that in Yugoslavia, but if you look back in history, it was the same with the First World War. Nobody quite knew why it broke out, and then suddenly everyone was in it, and everyone's waving the flag and fighting each other. So something must be behind it. In the case of Ukraine, you can go back over the history of Ukraine from 2004, there was a coup d'etat, and then there was a coup d'etat in 2014, and that led to the Crimean division and the Donbass division. That's a Russian area, the other's Ukrainian area. They banned the language. Then there were these right-wing groupings. And by the way, Boris Johnson met with one of the, like Azov Battalion, who the Guardian, the BBC, you look on their website before 2022, they call them terrorists and neo-Nazis in the BBC and on the Guardian website, and they're independent. So there's nothing new about it. We knew this. But now they hide that and say these are our allies. These are the people who were fighting Mariupol. Not neo-Nazis, right? So, you know,
okay.
We have to, sorry.
I know, okay, we need to move on. Thank you very much.
It does that to me as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I sense we're probably coming towards the end of the evening, so I'm going to try and ask a question which might leave us ending on a slightly more hopeful note. I'm going to try and ask a question which straddles local issues national issues and international, because this is a general election we're talking about. So given that in recent history there was a lot of cynicism about politics generated particularly by the Conservative Party and by the Brexit experience, where, in my opinion, lies were told in politics, and entered lying became a political strategy. We saw institutions and parliamentary conventions being ridden over, roughshod, with a Dominic Cummings type effect. And then we look at France at the moment, and we look at Macron, and we look at that managerial style of politics, which I suspect Keir Starmer to pursue, which then leaves the door open to parties in the far right, like Le Pen. And I wonder what can be done. Also, young people not being mentioned much today. Brexit destroyed young people's opportunities, in my opinion. So my question is, what do you think can be done to restore a degree of trust, integrity, and hope in our politics, which will even encourage people to come out and vote for you guys? Because I suspect, sadly, the turnout could be quite low in some areas because of cynicism and a lack of belief that the way that we do politics at the moment has any effect on ordinary people's lives. So I hope we can. My question is, how do we find a more hopeful, more constructive, new politics?
How can we restore trust in politics?
Trust, integrity, and many other aspects.
Okay. Thank you very much for your question.
Well, I agree with you. There's been a lack of lessening of integrity. Christian and other religious values have fallen away in this country. I think the Muslims still have quite a strong ethic there. The churches are not full. Integrity and trust comes from example, and I think the examples of our recent leaders has been poor, and therefore we look around as they're doing in America. How have they ended up with 2 octogenarians? It's ridiculous, and also they're both under indictment. So back to this country, we've seen a great lessening of integrity from our leaders, and that example is followed by everybody, from MPs down to councillors, down to the chap walking the streets giving the parking tickets. And if you don't have and I don't want to make a great claim for Christianity or any other religion here, but all religions have a part to play in redeveloping integrity. And I don't think that Starmer is a very strong leader. I think Angela Rayner has got a dangerous influence on her way to the left, where most of us would want to be. I don't think the Conservatives got a particularly good leader, so we have to look around. I'm not going to make any suggestions, but the only way forward is by example, and we can all, if one uses a Christian ethic, we can all, by setting a good example in our own lives, set an example that perhaps others, and particularly our children, because our children have been mentioned several times, and they've been looking after their own development several times now.
Thank you.
Very good question to answer in 90 seconds. Right, we've got lobbyists in Parliament that we need to take out. We've got criminals in Parliament we need to take out. We've got more criminals percentage-wise, proportionally, in the House of Commons than we do throughout the whole country. Wow. We've got more people caught with drugs, gambling, betting, various different things. So we need to get rid of that. I was going to tell you about the biggest lie that's actually going on, right? So part of building renewable energy infrastructure, I work with carbon accounting and trying to reduce CO2 emissions. We're going in the wrong direction, right? We're supposed to decrease by 2030 nearly in half, and every year we're actually increasing the amount of carbons going into the atmosphere. This government has signed up to use carbon capture and storage technology that's unproven, on scale, unreliable, that's super expensive, theoretically, to suck carbon out of the atmosphere that we've put in there from the ground, so our kids can have a livable future, right? And I think that this is the single biggest lie that our kids are going to look back to us in like 10, 20 years' time and just think, what the hell were you guys thinking? Why didn't you do something about it? Why didn't you take to the streets when you saw how ludicrous it is? This is what we've signed up. We've signed up for a Frankenstein, world geoengineering giant experiment. And if we get this wrong, all our kids are going to pay for it.
Which I could have a good answer, but one answer is more people like you saying what you just said. Bad politicians get elected by good people who fail to vote. That's the problem we've got. And somehow it's become acceptable for people to tell lies when everyone knows they're telling lies. I mean, Trump is maybe about to be re-elected. We know he's a liar. Boris Johnson, I'm afraid, was much the same. And we've got parties here who are prepared to say almost anything to get themselves elected. And it is a very sad, but I think we'll get through that. We'll get through that. We'll get back to the time when somehow or other there's a sort of cadre of people who are, but it was bad 100 years ago because there were groups of people who were in control and somehow they were brought up to feel it was their responsibility to govern properly. And we've got away from that. There's no way of getting back to it until we all join in together.
Yeah, when the original Putney debates took place in 1647 in St Mary's Church, Cromwell's army, or the New Model Army, discussed about how democracy would look, how power would be exercised, who should have the right to vote. And the division basically broke out between those who felt only those who've got a stake, own property in the country, should have the right to vote. And the others, the levellers, the more plebeian layers of the army, said, no, everybody is given rationality by God, and therefore everyone should have the right to vote. There is, however, a genuine question that followed from that, which was, as soon as you actually get the right to vote, and everyone has that right to vote, then it is eventually inevitable that people question the property relations. And I think that remains the case, and it has been the dominant question for 150 and more years. We secured the right to vote for men, the majority of men, in 1867. We secured the right to vote for men and women in 1928, but even then it wasn't fully all men and all women. And basically, the struggle of the Labour movement to achieve the right to vote took place in spite of the fact that Parliament existed for centuries without the right to vote, with only property relations dominating the right to vote. So what emerged in the Paris Commune of 1871 was a demand which I think is still relevant today, and that is that all power, all elected officials, and all bureaucratic power should be subject to election, needs to be recallable by those who elect them at any time. So if you elect someone, you should be able to remove them at any time with a recall referendum, remove them and put someone else in power. And then I wouldn't mind what party is elected, because I know I'll be able to remove them if they don't do what you want.
Yeah, so thank you very much for a positive question and a positive answer. I think one of the answers is that you should think about standing for office in all seriousness. And everybody in this room that feels passionately, that feels that they want to make a change, then do it, stand for it. That's why I'm standing here. I was getting incredibly irritated with how things were, especially how things have been in this country for a few years, and I thought, right, I need to put my money where my mouth is. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to do this. It's a bit of an unusual experience, as I think we can all agree, but it is well worth it. So if you feel passionate, and you spoke eloquently and clearly, so you're already halfway there, you know what I mean? If you have a brain and you're willing to express it, go for it, because even you standing for that makes everybody a little bit more honest, especially if you speak your truth. So I would say everybody that wants to do it, stand and speak your truth, and that will balance things up a bit. And the other things in terms of like the system is a mess. It is. Proportional representation will enable many more parties, which should take some of the power away from current parties, which means that their people get in, and that sort of feeds the system. That's not very healthy. And even the people in the system will tell you it's not very healthy. There's loads of books written the last couple of years about why we get the wrong people as MPs. So the answer is stand yourself, go for it. People exactly like you, do it, and then we'll be much more sort of, the government will look a lot more like the people on the ground. That's how we do it.
I'm sensing, yeah, we're all getting a little bit tired. What I suggest, if you like, is we can do a couple of really quick fire rounds. So people haven't got a chance to ask a question, like you've got like 10 seconds to answer.
Well, we're taking 3 questions
Yeah,
at the same time.
yeah, we could do that.
So,
Yeah. So like,
You didn't ask him, you felt like
oh, you're quite right. Do you feel your question was answered? You're quite right.
I think given it was a very large question, I think it's best to leave it open-ended as a unfinished work. Thank you for Thank you for attempting to begin to answer.
One question, immigration.
All right. So hands up who still would like to ask a question, just so I get a sense how many questions we've got left. Okay, not that many, 3. So why don't we take? Oh, thank you. So why don't we do this? Why don't quickly those who have those questions to ask them, and then you can address all the questions as part of your final rounding up. Is that okay? So you first. What's your question?
So should we be concerned about the rise of the right across the world? Should we be concerned about the rise of the right wing across Europe and across America as well? And thinking also in terms of reform.
Okay. Okay.
Now,
so
let me ask the question.
Yeah, okay, sorry.
The thing is, how can reform persuade me, or any person in this room, reform are a racist, sexist, anti-Semitic party that is absolutely undeniable. It's a xenophobic party. How can we how can I resist the rise of that sort of attitude across Europe?
Okay, so that's one question. Thank you very much. Other question, yes?
Mr. Hunter, what is Reform UK going to do to expunge gender ideology from schools? And I'm talking about primary schools and nursery schools, not just secondary schools and tertiary education. Of course, this would entail expunging it from colleges of education so that teachers will not be brainwashed as they are now.
Okay, thanks. So gender ideology from schools. And your question?
What will the parties do for trans rights?
Trans rights, okay. And there was one more, I think. Yeah?
Mine is about the press, and it's more, I think we all, hopefully, maybe not, think that there's lots of different mechanisms now for people to put their own comments forward. And basically, do you think there's any way, it's not even if your parties are going to do anything about it, do you think there's any way that we can maintain a freedom of the press and maintain fact checking? Like, do you think that's even possible?
Okay.
And if you do, are you going to?
Thank you. So that's a 4-pronged question. So we have the move to the right, and we have reform. We have trans rights. We have gender ideology in schools, and we have the freedom of the press. Sorry,
freedom of the press conjoined with fact checking.
Like
how do you
balance the two? Okay, so 4 things to address plus your final wrapping up speech. That's quite a challenge. Can everyone do it in 2.5 minutes? Do you reckon? 2.5 minutes. Okay, we'll start with you, Karen.
All right. Yeah. Well, so I want to start by saying thank you very much for holding these debates. I think it's terrific. I know you've got a little bit of flack. Next time around, do it again, and we'll support you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was good. So, concerning the right wing, yes, not right wing politics as such, but the particular form of right wing we're getting, yes, very worried about it, because it's bringing intolerance, it's bringing a them v us kind of mindset, and that's what we, particularly this country, has fought for so long. So yes, I'm very concerned about it, and we all need to push back really hard against it. Gender ideology and trans rights, well, so the Lib Dems stand for everybody should be able to be their own person. That's just, and I think that is a human value. Now, in terms of people are very upset and worried about it, this is a fundamental shift. I remember distinctly when being gay or being homosexual was seen as a terrible thing. I remember distinctly.
Nothing to do with being gay.
Bear with me. I wouldn't be allowed to have married my wife, who is Indian American, not that long ago, within my lifetime. And the difficult thing is not that people are terrible, although a small number of people are terrible. It's that it's a fundamental shift in what you've always felt and always known in your life. And we're at that point again with these issues around sexuality and gender. It's a fundamental shift from what we've known to be true our whole lives, and it's very hard to get your head around. And that's where we are, and it has not helped that it's been so toxic that we can't even have a normal, decent conversation about it. But fundamentally, there's human beings behind every single one of these things. And if they feel that way, and they're telling you they feel that way, they do feel that way, and we have to respect them. So I believe very strongly in that. I realize it makes a lot of people uncomfortable. We just have to push through that, and we'll find that there's a human being at the end of it. That's how we do it. And when it comes to press, I've been a journalist most of my life, so yeah, I mean, the biggest issue with the internet and all that was, you know, we all lost our jobs, and then the people that are journalists get paid incredibly badly. It used to be a great career, now it's really difficult. So what do you do about it? I mean, I'm optimistic. I think that we've got flooded by a lot of garbage, as we do all day. You go on Twitter for 5 minutes, you're like, oh my God, this is awful. So I'm optimistic. If you look at things like the New York Times, or if you look at the Guardian, or you look at the established, proper journalistic endeavours, people have started to pay money for them again because they value the extra fact checking, the extra information, the fact they can trust their information a little bit more. So I'm optimistic in that we'll start paying for news a bit more, and then that will bring in journalists. And there's still lots of us out there that would love nothing more to do than really good journalism. Then that's how we'll get back. But I do love the fact that we're all able to publish our own stuff. I do love the fact that everybody can communicate and you can send pictures to your mum on the other side of the world. That's all terrific. So there is a balance. We are absolutely not there yet.
So wrapping up now, yeah?
And then wrapping up, well, I'm going to wrap up by just saying thank you so much. I really love the fact that, I mean, it's a shame that the big parties don't bother to turn up. I really loved the fact we've had different views here. We've all been very cordial with one another. Yes, it's occasionally got a bit passionate, but I mean, hopefully we'll shake hands and agree, you know. Okay, you're sat next to him, see? So I think this is the great value. And let's be honest, a lot of countries don't get this. So we should embrace it, and everybody should vote. Obviously, you should all vote for me, but if you feel so inclined to vote for them, do that too. You know, everybody needs to vote. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I've worked for decades as a journalist in one form, another mainly print and radio, and it seems to me that the power of the billionaire class, if you like, to shape ideas in society and to manipulate ideas in society is at the root of all the questions that have just been asked. I have a brother who thinks he's a woman, but he's not a woman. But he thinks he's a woman. I don't have any problem dealing with his problems and his social relations and his sexual orientation and all the rest of it. But that doesn't make him a woman. And the problem is when they've nudged now society into pushing the whole society to, for example, in the universities, to use pronouns that are sucked out of someone's thumb in a university in America and then imposed on the whole of the world. In the universities and in the schools, they are trying to promote that everyone has to say a certain pronoun and accept that pronoun before anything else. I think that type of ideological manipulation and nudging produces the reaction within society amongst, for example, more devout Muslims or more devout Christians who think, I'm not going to let my children go to that school because they're teaching that, they're telling us we have to accept that type of thing. And then the other side to that is, for example, in sports and all this type of thing, which is a well-known debate, even the most militant individuals in favour of what are now called trans rights question those ideas that, you know, a sportsman who a couple of days before was a sportsman, self-declares as a woman and suddenly is competing in sports. So I think these are issues which have been manipulated by a layer of ideologues in the United States of America, and they promoted this through mass media channels across the entire planet. And they've also bought up organisations that are called fact-checking organisations that then promote a specific ideological orientation on multiple questions in the world. whether it be climate change, or whether it be the COVID vaccines, or whether it be with the efficacy of masks, or whether it be the Ukraine war. You get from all of you, whether you agree with what I'm saying or not, we're looking fact-checked on something if you use Facebook or use Twitter. And I think this is negative. I think free speech is pretty much an absolute question. And you have to allow people to openly express their point of view, and in that way people are able to mediate and deal with things. When you repress it and nudge people to hide what they actually think, then I think it has very negative consequences in society.
Great, thank you.
Xenophobia, move to the right. Yes, of course we're worried about it. Bear in mind a little bit that we're 100 years from Marx and Engels, and communism was going to be the answer to too much wealth being in too small a proportion of the population, and communism had a very strong ride for a long time. Come 1989, 1990, in effect, the communist world lost that battle because capitalism was producing better economic returns for those who were not involved. So I see the switch to the move to the right now as being inevitable because the other side has been discredited. But I'm strongly against these sort of parties that use things like xenophobia, cultivate societal complaints about what's going on in the rest of the country to their own benefit. And that is happening, and we need it answered. And we need it answered by Brexit, now known as the Reform Party. It's got to be answered. And nobody is saying anything about that. And you, sir, have said nothing. And I've been to 7 of these debates. I've asked again and again, the Brexit Party, please answer. Was Brexit a good idea? Has it produced any benefits? No answers. Okay, sorry. End of that. Trans rights. Well, I had a very great friend called April Ashley, who was one of the first people who ever went through that whole process. And also Jan Morris, who I knew well. I read her book, and I knew the horrors that those two went through because of what we now call their dysphoria. And I sympathize with that. I know that in Thailand, in Philippines, all of those areas of the world, there is what's called a third gender. And it happens. I've got shouted at a lot over the last couple of weeks from people who say there is only one side and another side, but it does seem to me there's a middle way. I know we've got problems in how we deal with it, but I do think there's a middle way. Sum up, internationalism is what I think it's a time for a bit more internationalism. It's time to get rid of nationalism. That doesn't mean to say we are defying British values. The great British values are 2 things. First of all, free speech, you mentioned, hugely important. And we hold the rest of the world holds British freedom of speech in reverence. And the other thing is the rule of law. The importance of the judiciary always being the most important of the 3 branches of government. And Britain shines there like no other country in the world. Let's use those 2 values in our new international endeavours.
So I'm going to be brutally honest here, right? The whole self-identity, trans rights is an area I don't really understand, okay? I went to school, Catholic school. We didn't have any sex education at all. It came from a country where it used to be like illegal to be gay, and you never talked about any of these issues. Now it's very decisive. It's very toxic. I think people are getting very hurt by it. You know, I think I just have to kind of take a step back and it's all about allowing people. If somebody wants to identify or act that way or whatever, let it be. You know, but then. This whole breathing down people's, throats about it, then you have to have like conversations about how it's actually thought about and like how you educate people. But on that topic, I don't really understand it. It's kind of what I'm still learning, right? And but for us at the right, the likes of Reform, I'm not having to go at you, but you're representing the party. It's not a party. It's a company. It's a registered company. You got 2 oil and gas companies. Funding it, it's like 70–80% funded by hydrocarbon fossil fuel lobbyists. So it's a lobbying wing. It's a tool, and it's they're going and they're destroying the future of our children, right? It's very toxic, it's very bad, you know, and it's very scary because we're going down different routes now. There's a lot of far right is growing, and a lot of this is actually ties into freedom of the press. We don't have freedom of the press. We've got 3 non-dumb billionaires who control over 70% of the media in this country. They're the thought police. They decide what we think about in the morning. They write stuff, and then whatever they write, then it's regurgitated by the BBC and LBC and different channels, and then it consumes us, and then they get all this hate, and they get people phoning up, battling each other about topics that are not important. We need to get rid of money from politics. We need to stop fossil fuel companies supporting politicians. We need to freedom of the press. We need to get rid of foreign ownership, you know, and also like just moving to the future. I was going to say like this. Obviously, I was standing for the Green Party, and my background as an engineer crunching numbers. We are going to have breakdown of some form of society, you know, in our lifetime. We need to start preparing for this, right? By 2050, it's already worked out that we're not going to have enough food, right? Our soils are getting eroded with the increased temperatures. There's a lot of land we can't grow on. We're having a lot more rain in this country. So we need to start working together and actually coming together and actually talking about our problems like this. More of these meetings, these very good meetings. Yeah. And one very last thing to say, I don't think anybody here should vote for people that were not represented tonight. Thank you.
Well, I'm the one who's come under most attack tonight, and I feel that I and Nigel Farage are a bit like Gareth Southgate with a team of people who are not quite pulling their fingers out and doing what they should be, but also have some problems as well. And the things you have talked about, there are definitely problems there. So I don't say there are no problems. So in terms of the 4 questions, let me deal with them in what I would consider ease of answer. So first of all, I feel freedom of press is immensely important, needs to be safeguarded. In this country is relatively good. We have a spread of newspapers. You may think some are printing garbage, but at least they're allowed to print garbage, and they're shouted at by other newspapers who say that's bollocks and not true. So they're allowed to do it, they're not locked up, as they might be in other places. And we have problems coming forward like AI and problems of that sort of thing, which are being looked at by lots of bright people, brighter than us. I'm afraid I would have to say that I think that Brexit is a success. However, you say we haven't answered that question at all. I think it's too difficult to get into a big argument. I'm happy to have them really separately. And you know, I think the Prime Minister's been banging on about the advantages really of the economy and how well Britain's doing. Whether that's because of Brexit or in spite of Brexit, people will argue about it. Gender ideology, I'm afraid I similarly plead some lack of knowledge about this, and it's extremely difficult to express any view about that, because you get, whatever your view is, and J.K. Rowling has found out, you'll get attacked. However, what I would say is that you will all have realised that in terms of young children in schools, it's already been outlawed and taken out of the by the Conservatives now. Perhaps that's the only good thing they've done in 13, 14 years. So for people in tertiary education, well, you know, they're getting to the age where they can decide for themselves about that sort of thing. But it shouldn't be, I agree with you, it shouldn't be taught, and you'll have to come back to me, Maria. I agree with you that we've gone from 0 to standing to 70 miles an hour to find 650 candidates to stand for reform, and some of them have been unacceptable, and we've tried hard to get rid of them. I hope that nobody can find anything dodgy in my media. They will all wash away, but I'm not on them anyway. But it is a serious problem. I think there are also other people like Channel 4 actors who sort of come out and try to trip us up, and you have to decide for yourself whether that's true or not. I think a lot of people are only attracted to reform because they're fed up with the Conservatives and the current government, you know, not doing a good job. And somebody over here mentioned immigration. And the dividing line between being worried about immense numbers of illegal people coming to the country and being racist is a difficult one. We try to be on the sensible side of that line, not racist, because it affects everybody in this room. If you've got longer waiting lists, lack of housing, and we've got 750,000 people coming in every 2 years, it's a problem for everybody. It's not racist to talk about it. It's silly not to talk about it. So I don't, there is a problem. We've got some bad eggs in the thing, and we're trying hard to get to that. And I think I come back in my last sentence because it says Timmy Uppy. Is that my name?
Yes.
Timmy Uppy. So I go back to the Gareth Southgate analogy. Thank God for Bellingham. Thank God for Nigel. So don't waste your vote. Okay? Don't vote for Labour, and you can tell Fleur that we all said that because everybody's been that. So make sure you vote for somebody here who's going to stand up for you and listen to your points of view and do something about it. And we definitely need a non-Labour MP in this group because you've got a Labour council, a Labour mayor, likely to have a Labour government. So vote for me, because he said that, so I'm saying vote for me as well.
That was a four-pronged question. Very quickly, are people satisfied that they were addressed, pretty much? Yeah?
No.
Okay. So...
No. Not at all.
No?
Not at all satisfied.
Okay.
May I speak?
Yeah.
I'm particularly dissatisfied with the Green Party candidate. I think it's appalling that he should unashamedly confess to total ignorance about an important issue that affects all women and children in this country. Children are being groomed into sexual abuse by adults and recruited for the trans industry in primary schools, and this is particularly happening in Scotland. Find out about it.
Yeah, so I'm England.
The Green, yes, but the Greens superglue the SNP in place, don't they?
You're talking about the CAS review, which is going through and these different reports are going through, which I've started reading. I'm just going to say
the CAS review, yes, read it. Yeah. But there's also WPATH, which fortunately doesn't have too much influence anymore on the National Health Service. But you need to read the leaked WPATH files.
Which ones?
WPATH, the World Association of Professional Transgender, they call themselves transgender.
I think it's disgusting to demonise trans people.
I'm not demonising trans people. I think anyone who believes they're in the wrong body is psychologically unwell and needs psychological help. I don't want to demonise anyone, but they certainly demonise people who disagree with them, and they mutilate children.
Okay, thank you. I'm just aware of time, because we have to go out of the room very soon as well, and I want to give everyone an opportunity to ask their questions, which is why I know it's a very quick round, but very quickly, because we all want to ask
That was my
questions.
statement. I think it's revolting to demonise trans people.
Okay.
I don't think they should be demonised.
Okay. You already asked a question.
I just wanted to ask them, would each of the candidates please just introduce themselves again, or their party, their name and their party?
Absolutely. Well, yeah, no problem. Well, why don't we do that very quickly? Very quickly, you can just introduce yourselves again.
Sure. I'm Kieran McCarthy with the Liberal Democrats.
I'm Heiko Koo with the Workers' Party.
Yeah, I'm Bill Colbert and I represent the rejoined Green Party. But may I just say one thing? I really can't allow you to get away, the Brexit Party, with saying Britain is doing so well. Look at this. This is 140 billion that Britain has lost.
You're just supposed to say your name. Sorry.
Under the European Union. 300,000 jobs in London.
Thank you.
Fergal McEntee from the Green Party.
I don't like lies.
There you go.
I'm Peter Hunter from the Reform and Anti-Remainer Party.
What I would like to do now is just thank you all very, very much for coming in the last of the series of debates pre the election. But keep an eye on the website. Maybe we'll continue this. No, I think let's see if we could do something. something in some way, shape or form. So keep an eye on this, and also you can look at previous debates that were filmed. I want to thank each of the candidates for coming, to Kieran, to Heiko, to Bill, who is representing, to Fergal, and to Peter. That is it. We have a wrap. Thank you.
Thank you.
All got so much going
Subject to access. It is on YouTube. Subject to access.
Subject access. Oh, okay. Because I apologize. I observe Bertha, which is like, you know, like modesty. So I don't really want my image to be shared on the social media. I do apologise.
I don't have control of it. Could you speak to this gentleman, Heiko, to tell him I don't know how to control it or blur it out?
So you didn't do anything wrong. That's me.
You could speak to him, to Heiko, because I don't know how to do. I don't know how to blur or anything. Well, if you get this gentleman here,
yeah, with a pink shirt.
Yeah. Tell him you don't want to.
Let him out. Let him out.
I won't shake it. I do apologise. I don't. With men, I don't shake hands.
On the other one.
But you were very kind and gracious. I wish I could be very close.
If you get hold of him. Yes. He's the one that knows what to do. He's the one that knows what to do. I don't know what to do.
in my case,
I